Welcome back, my followers, friends, viewers on my YouTube channel. And if it's the first time you watch at my YouTube channel, you are all welcome. Today I will talk about something really important. About the homicide of Brandon Lee. Who killed Brandon Lee? Yeah, you have just understood very well what I am talking about. You will tell me, Brandon Lee died in a tragic incident shooting the movie The Crow. It's not so. I start. And here I have all the official documents from America. These documents are not censored. But many superficial journalists, reporters, they don't investigate or do their job well because it wasn't an incident but a murder. I start. Brandon Bruce Lee was born on February the 1st in 1965 in Oakland, California, United States. He was born on February the 1st, so me and Brandon Lee had the same sign. We are both Aquarius. His parents were the myth, the absolute myth of martial arts, but he's still a myth and legend. He was the son of Bruce Lee and Linda Lee Cadwell. He died on March the 31st in Wilmington, North Carolina. Many, and I don't say everybody, but many superficial journalists, medias, reporters, vloggers told you that Brandon Lee died in a tragic incident while shooting in the set of the movie The Crow. No, it wasn't an incident, it was a murder, and I'm not scared to use this word. I start. In the movie The Crow, in 1993, The Crow, in which Brandon Lee played the role of Eric Draven, a dark gothic musician. The movie was directed by Alex Proyas and it was based on the comics The Crow by James O. Barr. But on March the 31st in 1993, and then I will go deep in what I'm just telling you. This is just a brief introduction before going deep until the truth, because I am like a crow too, and I'm Aquarius, against all the injustices. So, Brandon Lee dies in the first scene of the movie, in which, after his death, after he had been murdered 1 year before, one day before Halloween. So in the movie he was killed on October the 30th. After a year, on his tomb, a crow poses and resurrects Eric Draven, who is able to exit from his tomb, and he returns in his apartment, and there he remembers the aggression, the terrible rape and murder of his last fiancée Shelley. He had to marry the following day, because in the movie they decided to get married on the day of Halloween, on October the 31st. And so he reminds the rape, the brutal rape and murder of his last Shelley, and his own death by a gang of criminals. In this scene, Brandon Lee was shot to death by the aware actor Michael Massey, who played the role of the pitiless fanboy in the movie. The incident was considered due to the negligence of the staff who was working in the set of the movie. The members of the crew needed blank cartridges for this scene, instead to go and buy blank cartridges, because they were in a hurry. I don't believe at all in this version. They were in a hurry because they wanted to finish the movie as soon as they can. I don't get it. First, because this choice, the director of the movie, screenwriter, producers had to decide this choice, and not members of the crew too, because they were hurry to end up the movie. I don't get it. But this is the official reconstruction, and then I go deep. So they were in a hurry, instead going going out to buy blank cartridges, they decided to turn the loaded bullets into blank cartridges. And how? Of course, you can ask me how they could do this. Now I explain you the mechanism of the gun then gone wrong. The gun that was used was a real revolver, which was loaded with improperly made dummy rounds improvised from live cartridges that had the powder charges removed by the special effects crew. So in close-ups, the revolver would show normal looking ammunition. However, the crew neglected to remove the primers from the cartridges, and at some point before the fatal scene, one of the rounds had been fired. Although there were no powder charges, the energy from the ignited primer was enough to separate the bullet from the casing and push it part away into the gun barrel, where it got stuck. A dangerous condition known as a squid load. During the fatal scene, the dummy cartridges were replaced with blank rounds that contained a powder charge, and the primer, but not solid bullet, allowing the gun to be fired with sound and flash effects without the risk of a true projectile. But the gun wasn't properly checked and cleared before the blank was fired, and the dummy bullet previously lodged in the barrel was then propelled forward by the blank's propellant and shot out the muzzle, striking Brandon Lee's abdomen to death. Brandon will die 12 hours after, because many superficial journalists, reporters tell you that Brandon Lee died in the set of The Crow. No, it's not so. He didn't die in the set of The Crow. In the set of The Crow, he received the fatal shot that after 12 hours caused his death. Remember, as I just told you, Brandon Lee will die 12 hours later in hospital at 1:03 p.m. So, excuse me for this scientific and technological explanation of how was the mechanism of the gun that shot Brandon Lee to death was. Now I go deep and you understand me better. Why this is not completely it wasn't an incident, because I must go deep and tell you everything. Look at my huge document, official documents, real documents. So I must explain you more. I don't want to waste time. So it was said, okay, it was said that it wasn't, and this is for sure, respected the safety distance. Why? Because even blank cartridges, if shot too much near the body of an actor, of a person, of the staff, can provocate a serious injury and also death. For example, if I shoot you with blank cartridges, but very near to very sensitive parts of the body, like heart or other parts, even those innocent bullets can cause the death of somebody. But it's not this case, because the safety distance wasn't respected, but the bullet was really loaded. Why? It wasn't respected, the safety distance of shooting. Because, of course, I want to remind you that Michael Massey unfortunately died from cancer in 2016. Was a victim too, because he was very young, and one of the first times he appeared in a movie at the cinema. So he was also a collateral victim in his life. But people were to overwatch the distance, the safety distance. Why? The safety distance wasn't respected. When the director said loud, "Cut!" Brandon Lee didn't get up and didn't move. Instead, the other actors, the crew, one hypothesis was that they thought that he was joking. False. I will explain you later because these hypotheses, or if some of them made this statement was completely false. Then, some say they were ready to reshoot the scene, so they weren't immediately realizing that Brandon Lee was dying. Another weirdness: the scene in which Brandon Lee was wounded to death was shot 8 days before the complete ending of the movie in scenes and production. It's strange, because now you can ask me, why, if Brandon Lee dies in after 10-15 minutes from the beginning of the movie, how could they have done the whole Crow movie? This is a very creepy weirdness, because Brandon Lee wasn't shot to death at the beginning of the movie. otherwise the movie would be immediately stopped, because the main protagonist, the crow, was Brandon Lee. If he had died after 15 minutes from the beginning of the shooting, was impossible. So, doesn't it sound weird and strange that Brandon Lee shot the scene in which he had this terrible incident just 8 days before finishing to shoot the crow that was along the movie? Was shot 8 days before the ending of the movie, and Brandon Lee died on March the 31st, 1993, and not at the beginning of the movie. This is the explanation, because then in the scenes that had to be completed by Brandon Lee, it was possible to finish the movie with a double and a stuntman. But doesn't it sound creepy weird to you? Absolutely yes. I'm completely sure that now you would answer me yes. And now I tell you about the statement of the director Alex Proyas about when Brandon Lee fell down, shot to death, and Alex Proyas didn't realize it. This was his statement. I saw him falling to the ground with a lament. The bullet hole looked perfectly simulated, and the blood was perhaps too abundant. But overall, the scene was a marvelous success, and after having shouted, "Cut!" I said to shoot another one, above all for safety. In the set, everybody moved to reshoot the scene, and Brandon Lee remained lying on the ground, motionless. He didn't move, so I got close to him and noticed that the blood stain kept on extended. I bent down. I touched with a finger that liquid. It was warm and thick as true blood, and a silence of death fell down the set. The first person to realize was Eliza Upton, Brandon's fiancée, who was in the cast as production assistant. She screamed and rushed to Brandon while I was realizing that he was breathing weakly and his conditions had to be serious. Brandon was transported urgently to the nearest hospital. Doctors found a projectile into the stomach that caused the mortal wound. Brandon Lee died 12 hours after the shot at the New Hanover Regional Medical Center in Wilmington, North Carolina, after 6 hours of emergency surgery and many attempts of reviving. I can tell you that the doctors made the impossible to save Brandon Lee's life. That's for sure. Then I will tell you what they really did to save him. Brandon Lee died on March the 31st at 1 and 3 p.m. And now, there's much more to say. So, first of all, when many superficial documentaries and so on talk about Brandon Lee's death incident, they also say that he was a victim of the curse of the 27. I stress the 27 years, people who died at the tender age of 27. It's not so, because Brandon Lee died at 28. He wasn't 27, because his birthday had been, he was 28 on February the 1st, 1993, and he died on March the 3rd. Instead, Brandon Lee died on March the 31st, 1993. So, all those TV programs and some magazines who write Brandon Lee was victim of the curse of the 27. Wrong. He was 28. And because many times I read magazines, newspapers, I watch TV and say Brandon Lee was victim of the curse of the 27, like Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jonathan Brandis, and so on. I just want to stress that the name of the artists I just made you, there wasn't the curse of the 27, at least in 2 cases. For example, Kurt Cobain, I hope you know that it wasn't suicide, because Kurt Cobain had been murdered for sure. So, justice for Kurt. But this is the documentary about Brandon Lee. Because I have this sensation that many superficial people, maybe because they don't have the courage to investigate deeply, or they say that was that singer, that actor was a victim of the curse of the 27, and I think that it's just an excuse not to call it a strange passing away, isn't it? Okay, I'm not wrong. And what I'm just going to reveal you, and what I discovered thanks to these documents, and I repeat that these are official acts, real documents, but they are not top secret or censored. I think that few people have the courage to tell you the truth, because I don't know why. They don't have balls, I have them, and I go on. The material, what I've just read and I'm going to tell you, left me astonished. And I think that many people don't want to tell you the truth, even if it's not censored, but let's say unspoken. And I think that everybody must know everything about the mysterious death of Brandon Lee, better called a murder. Before going on, I want to stress that the subscription to my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV, has been, is, and will always be for free. As all videos you can watch on my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV, from investigations to aliens, from horror movies to dark romantic movies, from songs, from everything, from the first to the last videos you can watch because they are all for free. I want to stress they are all for free. You don't even have to pay a cent. They are all for free, and I'm not paid to shoot these documentaries, so I don't tell you this information because I'm not paid even a cent. So I feel with a light heart. And now I go on. The mother of Brandon, Linda, her fiancé Eliza Hutton, and then the sister Shannon, above all the mother and the fiancé, in the beginning denounced the production of the people involved for negligence, and then they retired the denounce, and so they stopped the investigations. How was it possible, and why? There is a reason. They retire the denounce for at least unintentional manslaughter due to negligence, and they accepted the explanation of the incident given by the production in exchange for compensation in money. For example, the mother had in exchange a compensation of $3 millions of dollars. And also the fiancée Eliza Hutton, in exchange for compensation in money. And I have the proof because I have all the videos, real videos, official videos, so I'm not telling you lies. This is why I tell you the truth. And they signed an agreement out of court that aroused the rebuke by the coroner, and who was holding an inquiry, because at least 7 people were close to go to trial for unintentional manslaughter, and instead, in this way, the trial was cancelled. I don't say that these people who had to go to trial were guilty. I'm not saying this. They could have been judged completely not guilty. But it's not beautiful that in exchange for compensation in money, a trial, even only for negligence, unintentional manslaughter due to negligence, was cancelled. I think that what I've just told you, it can be commented by itself. So, everybody wonder and ask in which scene in The Crow Brandon Lee died. I mean, was wounded to death. Then, as I told you before, he died 12 hours later in hospital. And I told you that it is said that he was shot to death in one of the first scenes. They tell you when Eric Draven returns home and he finds out that criminals who are raping and murdering his left fiancée Shelley. And so, of course, it's the fact that this scene, and then next I will tell you if that was really that scene or not. It's pretty weird that it's creepy weird that Brandon Lee was shooting the scene in which he died few days before the end of The Crow movie. I tell you the truth. The scene has been shot, they say, 3 days before the ending of The Crow movie and 8 days before the end of everything and of the production and so on. I tell you the truth, What the fuck? Forgive me, but these smells not incident. These smells only murder. Now I can't help talking about the myth, the legend Bruce Lee, because in a complete documentary with the aim to inform you in everything about Brandon Lee, of course I can't help telling you very important facts about Bruce Lee, even if not deeply like Brandon Lee, because it's his documentary, but I must talk about you, Bruce Lee, the myth, the legend, the immortal myth. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, California, United States, on November the 27th in 1940, and he died in Hong Kong. And you know, and then I go deeper in mysterious circumstances on July the 20th in 1973. He was a very great actor, absolutely a myth, and he is still loved and always remembered, not only as a great actor person, but for his incredible and unique ability in martial arts. He was absolutely the number one. And then in the movies he showed, he displayed in the movies his incredible, very incredible, stunning ability in martial arts, and he started to study martial arts in Hong Kong, attending for 5 years the prestigious school of Wing Chun. But then he kept on practicing martial arts and becoming always better and better until I think the best one of the world in the United States. I want to remind you some mythical movies with Bruce Lee, like From China with Fury, or for example, this is one of the most famous ones, the Enter the Dragon. And I'm shocked about this coincidence with then the death of his son Brandon, because in the movie of 1973, in the movie in which Bruce Lee was the protagonist, I'm talking about Enter the Dragon. This movie was released at the cinema when Bruce Lee had just died. I want to explain you better. Bruce Lee died on July the 20th in 1973, and the movie was released at the cinema on August 24th in 1973. But there is a difference. Even if both the movies, Enter the Dragon and The Crow, had been released after the death of their protagonists, Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee, there is a big difference because Brandon Lee died while he was still shooting the end of The Crow. Instead, Bruce Lee already finished to play in the movie Enter the Dragon. But during the dubbing, also in of course, I want to stress another coincidence. They died very, very young, because also Bruce Lee died only at 32 and Brandon only at 28. So, oh my God. But I wanted to tell you that when Bruce Lee, of course, died, he became and is still the legend of martial arts. But everybody wonders, which is the cause of the death of Bruce Lee? He was only 32. What the hell? There are, of course, obscure points. I can tell you that on May the 10th in 1973, during the sessions of dubbing of Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee suddenly felt very, very bad. He went to the toilet and began to vomit. He had high fever and convulsions, and he was transported in hospital, where the doctors during the analysis and clinical exams, there was for sure the presence of two cerebral edemas, and they gave him the mannitol, that it's very useful to reduce the swelling of the brain. And in fact, in that case, that medicine saved his life. And now we are at the evening night of the death of Bruce Lee. The evening of the 20th of July 1973, while he was at Betty Ting Pei's house. Betty Ting is a very famous cinema producer and actress in Hong Kong. He was at her house with workmates, colleagues, friends, and so on. People with whom he collaborated for work, and so on. At some time of the evening, he was hit by a very strong migraine. Betty, to help him, gave him a pill called Equagesic, containing both aspirin and meprobamate. Bruce Lee so decided to rest, I think, on a couch, and then he died. At least in this case, there was a trial, but at the time of Bruce Lee's death, there was only Betty Ting, because the colleagues, friends, they were all went away. So at the moment of his death, there was only Betty. The only thing for sure, and it's not Betty's fault, I want to stress, and there were other times. So in those periods, we were informed like nowadays. The surest thing is that it was transported too much late at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Hong Kong, and at about 10 p.m. Bruce Lee was pronounced arrived death in hospital. So, not like the son, because Brandon Lee underwent a very long surgery of 6 hours, and he died in hospital after 12 hours. Instead, Bruce Lee didn't die in hospital. He already arrived deceased. That's for sure. Betty lost precious time, because when Bruce Lee didn't wake up, Betty, instead to immediately call the ambulance, first she called the producer Raymond Chove, and then her own doctor, who tried to revive Bruce, but with no results. So they called the ambulance, but Bruce Lee was already dead. Moreover, the autopsy wasn't very clear about the real cause of the death of Bruce Lee, because in the autopsy of Bruce Lee there is written that maybe the cause of Bruce Lee's death was there was a probability of an allergic reaction to one or more substances contained in the aspirin. So, with much probability, and you know, I studied medicine because I wrote some long thriller horror scientific novels I must publish. And so I had to study criminology, but also medicine, and so on. So I know that in autopsies it's not very clear when it's used the word with much probability, because in an autopsy you want to read disease, the cause of death for sure. So however, about Bruce Lee's death, I have my perplexities, because he really had been hit before that night by two cerebral edemas. And there is written also in the autopsy that he was with big probability allergic to meprobamate. And as I told you, he had been really hit by two cerebral edemas previously, and so the autopsy found a scientific cause of death, because the most evident symptom that brought Bruce Lee to death was that his brain, the brain of Bruce Lee, was swollen like a sponge, sign of an excessive accumulation of liquids, and also sudden and excessive accumulations of liquids into the brain due to a possible renal dysfunction, because they found in the lungs there was a flow and blood in hair sacs that are not rare in all the people who receive very strong beatings, fists in the kung fu. And there were concrete proofs that unfortunately Bruce Lee in the movies he shot, the same cinema producer admitted that the actor had received too much hard beats, and other actors went beyond the script, and so Bruce Lee was really beaten in a dangerous way. After the funeral, the official cause of death still remained unknown. And so there were riots in the streets of Hong Kong, and it was necessary the intervention of agents in proof of riot. And even the verdict of the judge leave me perplexed, because I tell you the truth, if I hadn't read the final verdict by the judge, I could tell you that I was pretty sure that Bruce Lee died because he could have been beaten in the movies shot. Always martial arts, violent scenes, and so some actors bet him more, and they went over and over the script, and then I will make you see, and I saw the photos of Bruce Lee when was brought for the autopsy, and then in the coffin. I can tell you, and I will show you those photos, that Bruce Lee, as soon as I saw the photos of the corpse of Bruce Lee, I thought about his head was really swollen and bigger than normal. The size was bigger than normal Bruce Lee you see in the movies. And then he was all made up in the coffin for the funeral, and it's not rare to find these photos on internet. And I want to be direct and sincere. When I saw those photos, I thought that Bruce Lee died from cerebral edemas. But the judge of that age threw obscure shadows about the death of Bruce Lee. And I tell you why. The final verdict, this is the final verdict. Even if the doctors found a scientific cause of death, the judge put in doubt the accidental death. Even if there was the proof that he had cerebral edemas, this was the verdict. And you can imagine the reaction of people in Hong Kong. There were riots, and still his death, still nowadays in 2024, today we are at the middle part of the month of January 2024, and still the death of Bruce Lee is object of discussions, and it's still considered a mysterious death. And the judge also stressed that there wasn't the certainty that Bruce Lee was allergic to death medicine. So, nowadays, and 4 years from Bruce Lee's death, there are many hypotheses about his death. The first one remains the hypothesis of murder. For example, the karate champion, the American karate champion Mike Anderson, close friend of Bruce Lee, gave this hypothesis. an oriental herbal poison untraceable in an autopsy made after 36 hours from the death. And Bruce Lee's autopsy was made after 36 hours. It's just an hypothesis by Mike Anderson. There's not a concrete proof. The biggest part of the public opinion talks about cover-up and murder. I want to stress this, in 2022, a study by Spanish researchers hypothesized that the death of Bruce Lee was caused by an undiagnosed previous renal dysfunction. This is one of the last studies, so in my opinion it could be so. Everybody makes an opinion of your own. Because on a side I can tell you for sure that Bruce Lee wasn't in a perfect health like Brandon Lee. Completely different. He really had those cerebral edemas, and he also took that pill, and he could have been allergic to some substances. On the other side, Hong Kong didn't love, I think about the government didn't love Bruce Lee, but I don't see a real motive to kill him, because Bruce Lee, he wasn't a revolutionary against the government. A government doesn't kill an actor just for a few words. Then Bruce Lee also lived, he moved to Hong Kong, but he also had a formation in the United States, so I think that the government hadn't nothing to do with Bruce Lee's death. And also, they say that China mafia killed Bruce Lee because he displayed martial arts in his movies. In my humble opinion, it's a weak hypothesis, but if you read on the internet many pages, they tell you the biggest probability about Bruce Lee's death was Chinese mafia. I'm not among them. It seems to me a weak motive to kill him. Only for martial arts. He's not the only actor practice that. But everybody is free to have his own opinion. I go on. Bruce Lee has been buried in the lot 276 in Lake View Cemetery in Seattle, Washington, and then beside there is also the tomb of Brandon Lee. And now let's return to Brandon Lee, because this is the documentary about who killed Brandon Lee. Who killed Brandon Lee? I immediately go. Brandon Bruce Lee was born in Oakland, California, United States, on February the 1st in 1965 by, as I told you before, the myth Bruce Lee, born in Hong Kong with European origins, while the mother Linda was American with English and Swedish origins. After 7 years that Brandon Lee's family lived in Los Angeles, in 1971, because Bruce Lee had to work there, they moved in Hong Kong, but only for 2 years, because in 1973, when Brandon was 8, there was the tragic death of his father, Bruce Lee. And so they returned in the United States. After the degree, Brandon subscribed to a prestigious acting, and he kept on practicing martial arts as his father taught him very well when he was very young. He was a kid. Then he starts to shoot some movies based above all on martial arts. I want to tell you some movies like Kung Fu, The Next Generation, Kung Fu the movie, Laser Mission in 1991, and then, wow, he was co-protagonist with a myth of action cinema. He's a myth. He was co-protagonist with Dolph Lundgren in the movie Showdown in Little Tokyo in 1992. And I can tell you that it was, I loved very much that movie. It was a very great movie with Dolph Lundgren. And in 1992, he is the protagonist of another very good movie, Rapid Fire. And then in 1993, it arrives that chance that Brandon believes the time of his life, the real greatest chance of his life, to play the role of Eric Draven in the movie The Crow. Because Brandon was a bit tired always to play movies about martial arts and only action movies. Instead, in The Crow, Brandon said, and it wasn't so, he didn't have, of course, do specific, he didn't have to play martial arts, and he didn't have to display his physical performances. Stop! Because if you watch The Crow, and you know well that The Crow has been completely cut off, I even don't remember how many scenes they cut from the original version and from the VHS. But next I will make you see for you. My followers, friends, viewers, you are all welcome. I can tell you that in the crowd, Brandon Lee really did incredible physical performances. Not all the actors could have been able to do all those action and incredible physical abilities Brandon Lee had, because Brandon Lee was amazing, amazing. He was an actor in bloom. His beauty, there's no need to comment the beauty of Brandon Lee, because Brandon Lee was one of the most handsome actors of the cinema, and I want to add, in the history of the whole cinema. He was a stunning beauty, but he was also very good in acting and in playing. In fact, he stated that in The Crow he could show his ability to be a true actor, to play a drama part with the expression of his face, and he didn't bear anymore to be labeled like the son of Bruce Lee. He wanted to become a complete actor. But I think that in his last, unfortunately, movie, The Crow, Brandon Lee already showed his incredible ability, not also physical abilities, but also the expression of his face in The Crow. I think, this is my humble opinion, that Brandon Lee had to win the Oscar in The Crow post-mortem, because I want to remind you that the mythical Heath Ledger, who unfortunately died in playing the Joker in The Dark Knight, he received the Oscar post-mortem, and he had already won another deserved Oscar in The Secrets of Brokeback Mountain. So it was completely right. Heath Ledger was a myth, and unfortunately he died only at 28 for an overdose. I think that Brandon Lee in The Crow was a complete actor, because during the movie he lost 20 pounds. He was brought to an extreme plane from 5 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. and then he was playing with a face that he deserved the Oscar. And I hope that it's not too late to give Brandon Lee justice for his murder and also an Oscar post-mortem. I really pray and hope for that, because he deserves justice and he deserves a recognition, a post-mortem Oscar, Golden Globe. Think about it. It was perfect, really. And he's still very loved. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, not paid to shoot these very long documentaries, because I want, like many people who loved him, that he deserves justice. And I'm sure that this year Brandon Lee will have justice, as promised by one of my favorite actors ever, Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal is a myth for me. I watch and rewatch always his movies, and I consider him not only one of my favorite actors ever, but also a very great human being. A man with values. He didn't accept an incident for Brandon Lee. He wants the truth. As I will make you see, he stated in important interviews. And he also promised that he will take the killer of Brandon Lee. I trust him. Also, Chuck Norris told I know how Brandon Lee died. So, was Brandon Lee's case is a cold case and an open case, not closed. But let's talk about the movie The Crow. The Crow. To end up this movie, of course, they had to change the script, and the last scenes that Brandon Lee had to play, but he died, were played by a double, and they say also a stuntman. The script was modified in a way that you don't see Eric Draven completely clear, so that the double was perfect, and it was completed also thanks to digital reconstructions and scenes made with computer. For example, they cut a screenshot of the face of Brandon Lee and then put it with a computer program on the face of the double. So if in some scenes there is the body of the double, but you recognize the face of Brandon Lee, was because that was that screenshot made with computer. The movie was released a year after, and it was a success at the box office with $170 million. And so, Brandon Lee still nowadays is considered a myth, a legend. And The Crow has become a movie, the cult. There was a very sad coincidence, an obscure coincidence between the movie The Crow and the real life of Brandon Lee, because in the movie Eric Draven and Shelley had to get married the day of Halloween on October the 31st, but the evening before, on October the 30th, that criminal gang killed both Eric and Shelley. Brandon Lee, as I already told you, died on March the 31st in 1993, had to get married on April the 17th in Mexico. And it was already all prepared and fixed with his left girlfriend, fiancée, Eliza Acton. And instead, few days after, there was his private funeral and not his wedding. And Brandon Lee lies buried in Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, Washington, United States, before the father Bruce Lee. Here Bruce Lee, here Brandon Lee. As I told you, The Crow was released a year after, was released on May the 13th, 1994 in the United States. The movie is a cult. But when Brandon Lee died, all the crew, the director, were skeptical if finishing the movie or not, because it wasn't easy to complete The Crow, both for the death of the protagonist. The Crow, Brandon Lee, really died, but also for the shock of some actors who even were in the scene in which Brandon Lee was shot to death. He died in hospital, but that shot was fatal for Brandon. For example, Sophia Sheena